Hello, my name is Marin Arden, the daughter they once called worthless, and the same daughter who now has crowds lining up to see her art. But before that, I was the girl thrown out, bleeding with nothing but $1 in my pocket. They told the world I was unstable, that I was dangerous. But the truth, they were afraid of me finally speaking. And when my own mother showed up at my exhibit, she smiled and said, "We're so proud of her resilience." I looked her in the eye and answered, "You are not here to support me. You are here to claim me now that the clay is worth something." Before we go on, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. We bring you new stories every day. Hit like and let us know what city you're watching from in the comments. Dinner used to be the only time of day I could pretend we were a family. For 15 minutes, I could just focus on plates and cutlery lining up silverware, like soldiers, hoping that just once no one would raise their voice, that maybe Mom would smile or he would keep his belt on. That night, I set the table in silence. The smell of reheated pot roast filled the air, bland and heavy. I'd been careful, polished the forks, folded the napkins, even lit the cheap tea-light candle from the dollar bin. Maybe peace came in small efforts. My stepfather Vernon plopped into his usual spot like he owned the very air. His son Beau, 8 years old, legs swinging under the table, was already barking out commands like a prince with a plastic crown. "Juice," he said flatly, not even looking at me. I poured him a glass of apple juice, hands steady, jaw tight. Darla sat down across from me, tapping at her phone, not acknowledging a single thing. Vernon muttered, "He likes it with ice." I stood, went to the freezer. As I returned, Beau sighed loudly. Too slow. I placed the glass down gently. He smirked, slurped it, and tossed his fork onto the floor. "Oops," he said. Didn't bend, didn't blink. I bent down to pick it up, knees aching against the linoleum. When I rose, I glanced at Mum, but her eyes were still glued to her phone. I placed the fork beside his plate and tried to sit down. I had barely touched the chair when Mom's voice cut through the air like a slap. "He eats first, then you clean up. He is the king. You know your place." I froze, then sat anyway, just for a second. I was hungry too. Vernon looked up slowly. What did she just do? Beau laughed. She sat. Vernon slammed his fork down. "Did I say she could sit?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came. Instead, I stood up again, my legs stiff. He stared at me with that look, the one that always came before the belt. My stomach dropped. "Juice," Beau barked again. I turned to the pitcher, but the glass was still full. He had not even finished. Vernon stood, his chair scraped back. I said, "Serve him." I swallowed. "He has arms. He can serve himself." The silence after that sentence was deep and dark. Then I saw Vernon's hand move. He unbuckled his belt. The sound of leather sliding through denim loops filled the kitchen like a death rattle. I backed up. "Say it again," he said, stepping toward me. I did not, but my silence was not obedience. It was anger, coiled and silent. The first hit came fast across my upper arm, the second across my back. I screamed. "Vernon, stop!" I gasped. But Mom did not move. Instead, she stood, walked over and grabbed my face so hard her nails broke skin. "You feed him," she hissed, "or you get out, worthless girl." He hit me again. Beau laughed. I stumbled backward, visions spinning. My right arm hung strangely. My shoulder pulsed in sickening waves. "Out!" Darla growled. I stared at her, at the woman who gave birth to me. She pointed to the door like I was a pest. "You heard me out." Vernon yanked open the front door. "You want to act like you are grown, then leave." I moved toward the hallway, barefoot in my sleep shirt and thin pajama pants. I grabbed my wallet from the counter. It was empty. I checked my hoodie pocket. A single wrinkled $1 bill. I glanced back. "Toothbrush," I whispered. Darla slammed the door in my face. The deadbolt clicked into place. I flinched at the sound. It echoed louder than the belt. I stood there for a moment, on the porch, dazed. The cold concrete burned my feet. The porch light flickered like it could not decide whether I deserved to be seen. My arm hung limp. I cradled it gently, trying not to cry. I was not going to give them that. Not anymore. I stepped off the porch and limped down the driveway. No bag, no shoes, no goodbye, just one broken arm and a single dollar. Half a block down, I saw a streetlight. It flickered once, twice, then held steady. I sat beneath it, my back against the pole, and stared up at the dark sky. A warm trickle slid down from my temple. I did not wipe it. I looked at my hands, trembling, scraped small, and said softly, "I am still here. Not gone, not erased, still here." The street lamp above me buzzed once, then quieted. The light cast a pale yellow glow over the sidewalk, making the cracks in the concrete look like veins in old skin. I shifted slightly on the bench, wincing as my shoulder throbbed. I curled tighter into myself, trying to get warm, but the thin cotton of my sleep shirt was never built for the chill of night air. The concrete beneath me was still radiating heat from the day, but it was not nearly enough. Not anymore. I had moved half a mile from the porch. They kicked me off, hoping to find a place that was not theirs. Somewhere no one would call me worthless again. A liquor store had its shutters down, neon signs off. I had settled under its broken awning, trying not to look like a runaway or a statistic. My stomach had been growling for the last hour. I had not eaten since breakfast. Cold toast, half-burnt bows left over. I had taken one bite before Darla snatched it back and gave it to him. Footsteps approached, quick, loud. I tensed. A group of teenagers walked past, laughing too loudly. I looked down, pretending I was not there, but one of them noticed me anyway. "You look at this lady sleeping on a liquor store bench like she is in a movie or something." Another voice added, "You want a drink, Cinderella?" Then a splash. Something cold and sticky landed on my chest. Half a cup of flat soda. I gasped, jerking back, which sent a jolt of pain through my bad shoulder. They ran off, their laughter bouncing off the brick walls. I did not yell, did not cry, just wiped at the wet spot with my sleeve. It only smeared the sugar deeper into the fabric. I stood slowly and walked. Downtown Bakersfield at midnight is not made for mercy. I passed closed shops, flickering streetlights, a boarded-up diner with faded letters still clinging to a promise of breakfast all day. I saw a church, a small brick one with peeling white trim. I limped up the steps and tried the door. Locked. I knocked once, twice, nothing. Not even a light inside. Down the block, I spotted a gas station still open. The fluorescent lights made everything inside look sterile and unforgiving. I stepped in. The man behind the counter did not look up. He just said, "Bathrooms are for paying customers." I have $1, I offered. He finally looked up. "That will get you a bottle of water, back wall." I nodded, trying to smile. He did not smile back. I walked past aisles of snacks I could not afford. The water bottles were lined up in neat rows, like little soldiers. I picked the smallest one and brought it to the counter. He rang it up. 89 cents. "You want a bag?" I shook my head. Outside, I found a restroom tucked behind the station. A cracked mirror hung above a sink, stained orange at the edges. I leaned in, turning my face toward the light. My eye was starting to swell. A dark bruise had bloomed across my cheekbone. There were scratches down my neck and dried blood in my hair. My arm was beginning to stiffen. "This," I whispered to the mirror, "is what worthless looks like to them." I looked away and left. I wandered until I found another bench. This one across from a bus stop beneath a billboard for injury lawyers. The phone number glared down like some kind of joke. I sat. Minutes passed, maybe hours. I do not remember closing my eyes, but I remember the voice that woke me. "You hungry, baby?" It was soft, weathered, like the voice of someone who had seen too much to be loud anymore. I opened my eyes. A man stood a few feet away, older, black, maybe 70, wearing a faded navy coat and carrying a brown paper bag in one hand and a rolled-up blanket in the other. I did not answer. He did not push, just nodded and lowered himself onto the bench beside me, slow and steady, like his knees had learned patience the hard way. He opened the bag, pulled out a sandwich, white bread turkey, maybe wrapped in wax paper. He tore it in half, handed one piece to me. I stared at it. My stomach growled before I could say anything. "You do not got to take it if you do not want," he said. "But I figured there is no harm in offering." I took it. My fingers brushed his for half a second. They were warm, rough. "Name is Thaddeus Thad Marin," he said. Most people just call me Mr. Marin or Old Man Thad, dependent on the day. I nodded. Still did not speak. He took a bite of his half-chewed slowly. Retired janitor. Used to mop floors at the courthouse. Served in Vietnam before that. Got myself a little room over at Grace Boarding House, 3 blocks east, $480 a month. Includes shared kitchen and bad coffee. I gave a small, crooked smile. It was the very first in quite a while. He glanced at me, then looked back out toward the road. Do not got to tell me your story, but I will tell you mine. And he did. How he got beaten near to death in 1964 just for sitting at a whites-only lunch counter. How his baby brother disappeared in Mississippi. How his wife left him when the factory shut down. How he had slept in alleys for 3 winters before he finally got on the list for the boarding house. But you know what, he said, finishing the last bite of his sandwich. Life got better. Not fast, not easy, but it did. You just do not quit. I looked at the half sandwich in my hand. It tasted like cold meat and dry bread, but it was the best thing I had eaten in weeks. He reached into his bag again and pulled out a small blanket. Not new, a little frayed around the edges. He placed it over my legs. You got fire, girl, he said gently. Even with them bruises, I can see it. Let it burn right, not wild. And just like that, the tears came. Not because I was hurt, but because someone for once did not want anything from me. I wiped my face with the back of my sleeve, sniffled once. My name, I whispered, voice barely a breath, is Marin. Thad smiled, eyes kind. Well now, he said, now I know who to pray for tonight. Now someone knew my name, and for the very first time I wanted to live. That thought stayed with me even as the grey morning light crawled in through the windows of the shelter 2 days later. I'd been moved to a temporary room, bare mattress, metal bed frame, plastic chair, but it had a door that locked and a small shelf for my shoes. That was more than I possessed in weeks. I was sitting in the small cafeteria that morning, cradling a paper cup of weak coffee, staring at a biscuit that crumbled like chalk. A few other women sat nearby, mostly quiet. One mumbled to herself. Another tapped a spoon against her tray like a metronome. Then a girl I had not spoken to before slid onto the bench across from me. She could not have been older than 20. Bright eyes, worn hoodie, one shoelace tied in a knot. You that girl, she asked. No preamble. The one with the stepdad who called the cops. I blinked. What? Do not got to lie, she said quickly. We all hear stuff. Staff gets calls, papers get passed around. The lady at intake said you acted out. Said you had a knife. I set the cup down too hard. Some of the coffee sloshed over the edge. That is not what happened. She shrugged like it did not matter, but her eyes lingered. I did not blame her. She did not know me. None of them did. But someone had already drawn the map of who I was, and it was not a kind one. Later that afternoon, a staff member named Nora asked if I could talk in private. Her office smelled like lemon cleaner and old printer ink. She folded her hands across a thin file folder with my name on the tab. Marin, she started gently. I want to be transparent with you, okay? We received a report. I did not speak, just nodded once. She opened the folder slowly. It says there was an incident. Your stepfather claims you threatened him with a knife, that you have been unstable. They also mention some concerns about your history, emotional outbursts, trouble with school. You were flagged as possibly volatile. I let out a short breath that might have been a laugh or maybe a warning. I had one episode, I said evenly. It was called Self-Respect. That is what they saw. Me saying no. Nora did not flinch. I will give her that. But she still looked at me the way someone looks at a glass about to fall off a table. Not broken yet, but close. They filed a secondary alert with child protection, she said a little softer. Even though you are 23, the report claims you might be a threat to minors in the home. That one stunned me into silence. They had not just kicked me out, they had buried me under paperwork. My family had made me disappear on paper. They said I ran away, I finally asked. They used the words flight risk. Nora shifted in her seat. They also requested that if you return to the house, law enforcement be notified. I pressed my fingertips into my temples, trying to push back the nausea rising from my gut. Is there a copy of the report? She hesitated, then passed over a few printed pages from the file. My hands shook as I took them. I saw the familiar names. My stepfather, Vernon. My mother, Darla, their signatures at the bottom and in the space meant for incident description. Subject became agitated. Threatening demeanor attempted to harm family member. Nowhere did it mention my fractured shoulder, the bruises down my ribs, or the night I slept on concrete while blood dried on my face. No mention of the soda thrown at me or the sandwich that saved me. My eyes stopped at one signature. Mom's Darla Whalen in cursive. She did not even use her maiden name anymore. She had chosen Vernon's identity like a second skin, and she had signed off on my eraser. She wanted me to disappear, I whispered. And now I have. I left Nora's office in silence and wandered back to my room. I sat on the bed, report pages still in hand, reading them again under the yellow bulb above. I should have cried. Instead, I remembered something Jalen once told me in 10th grade, back when we still thought growing up meant something good. You got to write your own version, Marin, or they will write it for you, and then you will be stuck living someone else's story. I had not thought about Jalen Sorrell in years, but her voice came back crisp and steady. If you were in Marin's place carrying bruises and false reports while no one listened, what would you do? Commenter number 1, if you believe sometimes writing your own truth is the only way forward. That night, I slipped out quietly and walked to the small public library near 8th and K Street. It was still open for another hour. I asked to use the computer lab, and the woman at the front desk handed me a scratch paper slip with a login code. I sat at the corner terminal. The chair creaked when I leaned in. The monitor flickered to life. Blue login screen, then the familiar desktop. I clicked into the browser, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then I began. Not a blog, not a letter to the editor, just the truth. I typed, "This is how you erase a daughter." And I did not stop. I wrote about the cold toast, the missing toothbrush, the way my stepdad called me a mouth with legs. I wrote about the bruise behind my ear that nobody saw. About how silence was the currency of that house, how I learned to fold my anger into polite nods and empty apologies. I typed until my fingers ached, until the library lights dimmed once in warning. Then I found a local survivors forum, a quiet one hidden under layers of clicks. I did not put my photo. I did not give a last name. But at the bottom, I wrote, "My name is Marin. I did not run away. I was thrown away." I hit post. The screen flashed, then cleared. I logged off. For a long time, I just sat there, hands still on the keyboard, breathing in the stale air and leftover heat from old machines. My heart beat like I had run a mile. Outside, the night was quiet, warm. I walked back to the shelter, slow, steady. My story was not loud, but it was mine now. They erased me with stories, and I planned to write one they could not delete. 3 weeks later, I stood outside a narrow shop, tucked between a boarded-up tax office and a laundromat with one flickering open sign. A painted wooden board above the door read Ash and Hollow Studio. No fancy lights, no catchy tagline, just that quiet name like it had nothing to prove. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Inside, the air smelled like wet earth and something sweetly smoky. Sunlight filtered through high windows, catching dust motes that danced above shelves of bowls, vases, mugs, each one shaped like someone had tried to make sense of the world with their bare hands. Behind the counter, Lizette looked up. Silver hair in a twist, apron splattered with dried glaze, arms folded. Her eyes scanned me, calm but not soft. "You showed up," she said. "Thad said you might need help," I replied, shifting awkwardly. "I can try." Lizette did not ask about my background, not about the bruises, not about the wrap still supporting my right forearm. Instead, she reached under the counter and pulled out a block of clay wrapped in damp muslin. "It is okay to be clumsy," she said, pressing it into my hands. "It remembers everything, but it forgives easy." That was the first kindness I could trust. The studio was quiet. No music, no chatter, just the low hum of a space that had seen sorrow before and did not try to fill the silence. Thad had driven me here the week before in his beat-up Chevy and said simply, "She needs to make something that does not scream." At the work table, I set the clay down and sat carefully. My arms still ached deep in the bone. When I unwrapped the brace, the skin underneath was yellowing from old bruises and faint purple lines ran like threads beneath the surface. I hesitated. Then I pressed both hands into the clay. It gave easily, soft, cool, almost comforting. But as I tried to wedge it, my right arm tensed up and the pain flashed white hot. I flinched. My hand slipped. The lump rolled, then caved inward. A half-formed bowl collapsed into a deflated heap. I stared at it. Breath caught in my throat. It looked like me. Something once upright now slumped and uneven. Lisette passed behind me, pausing without looking directly. "Symmetry is overrated," she said. "Pottery is about story. Even scars have shape." I nodded slowly, but I did not look at her. My fingers hovered over the ruined piece. "Do you think," I said finally, "clay remembers?" Lisette walked to the shelf and picked up a thick cup, slightly warped but glazed in a deep blue that shimmered. She set it in front of me. "No," she said, "but people do, so mold something they cannot forget." Later that afternoon, while others packed up their tools, I stayed behind. Lisette did not say a word, just handed me a fresh slab. I sat quietly and shaped it slowly, not trying to make it smooth, not chasing perfect, just letting it exist. Flawed, stubborn, lopsided. When the bowl was done, I took the tip of a wooden tool and carved 2 small words into the inside rim, still here. Lisette came by with a faint smile and a nod. She picked it up and turned it gently in her hands. "I will fire it tonight," she said. "Come by tomorrow." The next morning I returned before sunrise. The studio smelled of cooling kilns and hot stone. Lisette handed me the bowl glazed in soft ash grey, still warm like it had a heartbeat. I cupped it in both hands. The carved words shimmered faintly beneath the glaze. Still here. It was not beautiful, but it was mine. I do not know how long I stood there holding it. Maybe minutes, maybe more. Lisette let the moment stretch. Then she walked behind the counter and came back with something small, a card. She handed it to me. White textured stock, my name written in block letters. Below it in neat print, assistant clay technician, Ash and Hollow Studio. I looked up. "You are part of the studio now," she said. "Pay small, but you matter here." I folded the card careful like it was made of glass and tucked it into the inside pocket of my jacket. Felt like gold. That evening as I walked home, I passed a man yelling into a phone outside a diner, someone honking in traffic, a child crying in a stroller. The city was loud again. But inside me, something had gone still, like quiet water finding its level. My body still hurt, my past still followed. But now I had something in my hands that did not bruise. They beat my body, but they did not break my hands. I did not go home that night with just a bowl. I went home with breath I had not lost, halfway through a conversation, with fingers that no longer trembled when touched by silence, with something made, not broken. By the time a month passed, my palms were tougher. My right wrist still twinged when I pushed too hard. But Lisette had shown me how to work around it, how to let the clay guide me instead of fighting it. And most days, that studio on Linden Court became more than a building. It became somewhere I was not bracing for impact. That Tuesday afternoon, the kiln had just cooled. I was in the back room unloading shelves of biscuitware with Lisette. The heat still radiated faintly through the bricks, comforting like the last warmth of a fading sun. We did not talk much. We rarely did during kiln days. My hands moved carefully, cradling mugs, plates, little lopsided vases that other beginners had made, and one bowl I'd shaped with a spiral edge and a thumb-smoothed base. I reached for it when the studio door chimed, not the usual soft jingle. This was sharp, quick. Lisette looked up first, her hand paused mid-reach. I heard the voice before I saw the face. "Well, did not expect to find you playing house with mud." My heart stumbled. Keir. He filled the doorway like a shadow you thought was long gone. Taller than I remembered. Clean-cut hair, polo shirt, tucked into dark jeans. But he walked like he owned the floor, like he had never dragged a chair across it to pin someone in. My fingers stiffened around the bowl. He scanned the room, that same amused look curling his mouth, like he had just stepped into a bad sitcom. "Marin," he said, still pretending you are the wounded little artist. He let the door shut behind him and started walking slowly between the shelves. His fingers brushed the rim of a teacup, tapped a vase like it might be hollow. "Did not think you would land somewhere this sad. No neon sign, no followers, just dirt and middle-aged pottery teachers. Lizette stood beside me, her arms crossed loosely. She did not say a word, just watched. She had that way of letting the silence lean towards you, like it was daring you to flinch. Keir circled closer. Mom says you have been airing dirty laundry online, that you are telling your version. He chuckled. God, Marin, you are really doing it, huh? Playing the victim card like it is a full-time job. I set the bowl down, not gently. He kept going, strolling like he had nowhere else to be. You think anybody is buying it? That anyone actually believes you? I turned to him. He looked so sure, so bored. Like this was a game and he had already won. That used to unravel me. Not now. You came all the way here, I said calmly, because you are afraid. Because for once your version is not the only one people are hearing. Keir's smile twitched. You think this little craft project matters? I took a step forward. I think you showed up uninvited to a place you do not understand. That tells me everything. He scoffed. You are just noise, static. You will disappear like you always do. I looked down at my hands, still dry with kiln dust, stronger now, steadier. These hands made something. What have you made, Keir? I asked. Besides bruises. His jaw tightened. Lizette finally moved. She walked forward and stood between us, her presence quiet but grounded like brick. This is a studio, she said plainly. A place for healing. You brought poison in here. Keir turned toward her with a smirk. You do not know what she is like, what she has done. I know exactly what she is doing, Lizette replied. She is rebuilding. She turned to me. Do you want me to call someone? I looked at Keir. He was not smirking anymore. No, I said. Let him stay. Lizette raised an eyebrow. I want him to see something. I moved past him, walked to my wheel, sat down, took a fresh block of clay from the wrapped stack. My fingers did not shake as I slapped it down and began wedging. The smell of damp earth filled the room again, familiar, grounding. I centered the clay. The wheel hummed beneath my foot. I shaped it gently, my hands moving in steady rhythm. My breath matched the movement. I did not speak. I did not need to. Keir stood off to the side, arms folded, trying not to look like he was watching. But he watched every movement, watched me build something from nothing. When I shaped the lip of the bowl, I heard the floor creak. His shoes turned. Then the door opened again. This time the chime was softer. Lizette did not move until it shut behind him. Then she walked over, placed a hand lightly on my shoulder. That, she said, was strength. I nodded slowly, not looking up yet. I used to think silence meant safety, I whispered, but now I know it can mean power. She squeezed my shoulder, then let go. I finished the bowl, and for the first time in years, I did not care who believed me. I just wanted them to remember I was still standing. They wanted me voiceless. So I started sculpting my voice into something permanent. It had been a cold morning in Bakersfield, not bitter like the storms I had known, but a quiet kind of cold, sneaking in through sleeves and bones, the kind that made you want to wrap yourself in something that felt like care. I found it folded on the bench when I got to the studio, a quilted throw, patchy and worn, stitched together from pieces that did not belong anywhere else. Deep reds and faded navy cotton, old flannel shirts, torn muslin. There was a little note pinned to one corner, imperfect but stitched with meaning L. I sat with it around my shoulders for a while before opening the door. The fabric was soft in a way only age could make it, and for the first time in a long time I felt held. I was not sure how long I had sat there watching the autumn light stretch across the cement floor when I heard a knock against the doorframe. Thad holding 2 paper cups. One for you, he said, handing me the warmer one. One for the road if you know you feel like taking one. I raised an eyebrow. Bookstore night, he added. Community reads Cider Fire. Someone is always reciting Mary Oliver, even if no one asks them to. I gave a faint smile but shook my head. I am not there yet. He did not argue, just sipped from his own cup and sat beside me on the step. Then do not read, he said. Just sit, just be. We save you a seat near the fireplace. You do not even have to say hello. I looked down at the blanket around me. Something about the way he said be felt like permission I had not known I needed. That evening I went. The bookshop sat on the corner of 8th and Milner, wedged between a shuttered record store and a bakery that only opened for 4 hours a day. From outside, it looked like it had been forgotten by time. Inside, it glowed. Lamps with soft amber bulbs dotted corners of the room, and folding chairs no two the same, were scattered in a wide half-circle around a long rug. A fireplace crackled low in the back wall. Someone had placed a basket of knit throws near the hearth with a sign that read, "Borrow warmth, return later." I took the seat Thad had promised, second row near the middle. Not too exposed, not invisible. Someone handed me a cup of cider. Another smiled without asking my name. A young woman in her 20s stepped up first. Her voice shook as she began. She read a poem about a stroke she had at 17, about losing half her face for a while, about how no one knew how to talk to her after. Then came a man, maybe late 50s, reading a letter to a son he had not seen in over a decade. His voice cracked once, just once, when he said the words, "If you ever read this." One by one, people shared something that lived too long inside them. Some laughed, some cried, none apologized. And with every voice, something inside me softened. A crack, then another like thawed ground loosening under the touch of spring. Near the end, the host, a short woman in overalls and mismatched earrings, cleared her throat. "Anyone else?" I felt Thad nudge me gently. I shook my head. Then I stood. I did not know why until I was already walking to the front. My legs moved like they had made a decision without consulting my brain. There was no podium, just a small stool. I sat, looked down at the notebook I had started scribbling in weeks ago, more out of muscle memory than courage. My fingers found one page torn at the corner. I read. It was not the belt that hurt most. It was the sound afterward, the silence, like the world had agreed to forget me. Like I was trash swept into corners. Quiet, invisible, unwanted. The room did not breathe for a moment. Then someone clapped. And another. It was not thunderous. It did not need to be. It was steady and kind. I went back to my seat, cider cold now. My hands shook a little, not from fear, but from release. After the event, as chairs scraped back and people trickled toward the door, a woman approached me. Late 50s, warm eyes, behind large wire-rimmed glasses. She touched my arm gently. "My stepfather," she said quietly, "he did the same." I never told anyone. I never even told myself for a long time. We sat on the windowsill, talking long past the lights being dimmed. She told me about the years she lost pretending nothing happened, about the day she found a note she had written herself as a girl and cried until her ribs ached. I told her about the woods, the silence, and how even now I sometimes flinched at kindness. We did not trade solutions, just stories, and that somehow felt enough. The walk back was quiet. Thad did not say much, which I appreciated. His pace matched mine, unhurried. Outside my door, he paused and pulled something from his coat pocket. A small black notebook. Simple, worn. "Blank pages," he said, handing it to me. "But the very first one has something." I flipped it open. Write it all. Even the parts that ache. I looked up at him, my voice rougher than I had expected. "They taught me I was worthless." He did not blink. That was never the truth. For once, I did not argue. I just nodded. And for the first time in a very long time, I walked inside without locking the door right behind me. They tried to bury me in silence, but I was learning how to sing. And sometimes that song came through clay. It was early morning, just a week before Christmas, and the studio smelled like cinnamon tea and damp earth. I was working on a new piece, an angel wing cracked and crooked from an earlier mistake, now reshaped into something almost defiant. I had been sanding the curve of its edge, letting the rhythm of my hands quiet the mess in my chest, when Lizette's voice broke the stillness. "Marin," she whispered, her body frozen halfway between the sink and the shelf of glazes. "There is someone at the door." I did not look up right away. "Is it Thad?" I asked, brushing away dust from the base. "No," she said quietly. It is her." I turned, and there she was. My mother stood outside, barely inches from the glass. She was not knocking, just watching. Her coat was buttoned too tightly at the neck, and she clutched her purse like it might anchor her to the sidewalk. Her breath fogged the window, and behind it her face looked oddly gentle, curious almost. But I remembered that face when it snarled. I remembered it over me, looming, blaming. I stood motionless for a moment. My heart did not race. It went still, like it was listening, waiting. "She does not belong here," I finally said, voice low. But Lizette was already heading for the door. "I will send her away," she offered. "No," I said, shaking my head slowly. "Let her come in. Let her say whatever script she practiced in the mirror." The bell above the door jingled softly as it opened. The winter air curled in. My mother stepped through like she had every right. "Marin," she began, using the tone reserved for Sunday potlucks and church pews. "Honey, we have been worried sick. You just disappeared." I did not move from my spot near the work table. "I did not disappear," I said evenly. "I walked out bleeding." She blinked, clearly unprepared for the line I had drawn. "Well, Keir said you were not well. He said you were acting unstable." That name, that man, my stomach clenched. I had once believed that if I bled quietly enough, they might love me back. "You knew what he did," I said. "You knew, and you turned away." She exhaled sharply. "Families fight, Marin. Things get said. You have always been so dramatic, always turning everything into a performance." I nearly laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was all so predictable. The gaslight, the backpedal, the mask of concern. "You called me worthless," I said, still holding the angel wing in my hand. "I was 12. I remember the way your voice did not shake when you said it. You meant it. I still hear it in my sleep." She softened her tone, but her eyes remained flat. "That was discipline. You were never easy to raise. You were headstrong, stubborn." I looked around the studio. This space, the walls, the dust, the shelves holding every flawed attempt at beauty. It had become my sanctuary, my truth. "You do not get to rewrite it," I said. "This place is not for ghosts who lie to themselves." She took a slow step forward. "Marin, I came to help." "No," I said, "you came to control like always." Lizette had moved beside me, quiet but present, a kind of steady warmth. Behind her, Thad stepped into the studio, his hands still coated in clay from the back room. Others from the community had paused their work, heads turned, breath held. No one interrupted, but I felt them witness as anchors, and I understood in that moment what power actually was. "I am not your daughter by obligation," I said, my voice sharp but calm. "You made that clear when you chose him over me, when you told me I had invited it, when you said maybe if I was not so difficult." Her mouth opened. "Do not," I said. "Not here." Her eyes flicked to the others. She adjusted the strap of her purse. I just came to check to help. Like I said, I heard you were hiding here." "This is not hiding," I said. "This is healing. There is a difference." She looked at me for a long beat. Maybe she thought silence would make me reach for her like I used to. Maybe she thought shame would fill the gap and pull me back in. But shame does not stick when the truth stands next to you. "Then I will go," she said, lifting her chin with a faint twitch of pride. "That is all the help I need," I said. She turned, walked out, and as the door swung closed behind her, I watched her reflections smear across the frosted glass, distorted incomplete like a chapter torn from a book mid-sentence. The room was still for a few heartbeats after. Then Lizette placed her hand gently on my arm. "You okay?" I exhaled slowly. "I think I am ready now." I walked to the gallery window. The angel wing sculpture trembled in my hands just slightly as I positioned it near the front display. The figure stood tall, a broken angel wings patched and layered with ash-colored clay, standing not with grace but with resolve. It was not beautiful, but it was true. She thought she could rewrite the story, but I was already writing the final chapter. That morning, I stood on the corner of 19th and Chester Coffee, cooling in my gloved hands, staring at the impossible sight before me. A line that stretched halfway down the block, curling around the side of the tiny downtown gallery. People bundled in scarves and wool coats, murmuring to each other, stamping their feet against the cold, clutching printed invitations like gold. Some held brochures. Some just stared into the windows as if drawn to something beyond the glass. Lizette met me outside, cheeks flushed, eyes lit up like Christmas lights. "You should have seen them an hour ago. It was like folks had been waiting years to breathe." I did not answer right away. I was still processing. 2 days ago, I had stood toe-to-toe with the woman who birthed me. And this morning, people were showing up to see the pieces she inspired not out of reverence, but recognition and reckoning. Inside the gallery had been transformed. Soft lighting fell across rows of pedestals and wall-mounted sculptures. Thad had stayed past midnight, arranging everything. Even the old radiator in the corner had been dressed in a soft drape, as if the room itself wanted to forget it had once been cold. I walked slowly past each piece, letting the familiar contours pass under my gaze, hands frozen in grief, faces warped with shame, clay wings half-formed and shattered mid-flight. But at the center under glass was the one that made everyone stop breathing, the reforged wing. Its curve was not perfect. One tip sloped lower than the other, and the base still held faint scars from the night I dropped it. But it stood tall, jagged, dark, and defiant. The plaque beneath read, "The reforged wing created by a survivor of domestic and maternal abuse, anonymous until now." I stood behind the mic, heart thudding in my ribs like it did not know what peace felt like yet. Then I took a breath and spoke. "My name is Marin Arden." The gallery went still. For years I told myself my story was not worth hearing, that it was shameful, that if I just kept quiet long enough it would all fade. But shame does not fade. It ferments until you crack. I paused. Let the silence do its work. I was not just hurt. I was ignored, blamed, told to smile, serve, disappear. Told my bruises were misunderstandings, that my rage was hysteria. But clay does not lie. It remembers every tremor of your hands, every fracture you try to hide. The crowd did not move. Some looked down, some looked right at me. A few had tears in their eyes. "This is not a revenge exhibit," I said. "It is an obituary for the silence." Applause did not erupt. It grew slow, unsure, then louder, real. And then I saw them near the back wall by the door. My mother and Keir. She wore her usual trench coat, tightly belted, her hair pinned too neatly. He stood beside her, arms crossed, scanning the room like he owned it. They expected something. Deference, maybe. Dread. I did not give it to them. They moved slowly through the crowd, and wherever they went, whispers followed. I heard someone murmur, "Is that them?" And another answer, "Unbelievable, the nerve." When they stopped near the reforged wing, my mother tilted her head. "She has always been theatrical," she said under her breath, loud enough to carry. "We raised her with structure boundaries. This is just dramatics." Before I could respond, the woman standing next to them turned her head. Elegant, older, her press badge clipped to her lapel. "She sculpted your cruelty into something people paid to see," the woman said evenly. "That is not drama, that is art born from survival." My mother's mouth twitched. Keir looked away. A man with salt and pepper hair approached a small card tucked in his suit pocket. "Ms. Arden, I'm from the National Foundation for Contemporary Arts. We've been following your work since it began circulating online. We would like to discuss a curated tour, New York, Chicago, possibly London." My mother stepped forward suddenly. "That is our daughter," she announced, smiling like she had practiced. "We're just so proud of her resilience." I turned toward him. "You should know," I said calmly. "They are not here to support me. They came hoping to claim me now that the clay is worth something." The man raised an eyebrow. "Thank you, that's all I needed to hear." A reporter leaned in with a mic. "Marin, if I may ask, how much of this exhibit is autobiographical?" I did not flinch. "All of it," I said. I was beaten for not filling a plate fast enough. I was left bleeding by someone who never lifted a hand to carry anything but his own pride. And when I spoke up, my own mother called me a liar. Gasps rippled. Cameras clicked. "But I did not rot," I continued. "I reformed." This time the applause was thunder. I caught my mother's face in the moment the crowd surged, red, hollow-eyed. Keir touched her arm, but she shook it off. They turned, walked out, without another word. I did not follow. I did not need to. To me, they were just silhouettes now, no longer anchors, just shadows receding. Later, long after the crowd thinned and the lights dimmed to a warm hush, I stood in the back room with a candle in my hand. I lit it quietly, placing it beside a small mound of untouched clay, not for them, for her. For the girl who survived when no one listened, the girl who stopped asking for permission. The girl who chose fire over fear. I left the candle burning as I walked out. I was not rebuilding my past. I was sculpting a future they would never touch. The shelf was nothing fancy, just a piece of reclaimed barnwood I had found at a salvage yard off Linden Court, and I sanded it down myself, stained it with a walnut tone, and mounted it on the narrow wall between the kitchen and the window in my new apartment. It creaked slightly under weight, but it held. I arranged the 3 pieces like chapters of a book I had finally finished reading. The cracked angel wing stood in the center, its sharp edge softened by time and healing hands. On one side sat a bowl, earthy and smooth, with the words, "Still here," etched along the rim just deep enough to catch the light when the sun hit it in the morning. On the other side, the newest piece, a phoenix. Its wings were built from twisted clay molded around bits of brass belt buckles and copper wire. I had pulled those scraps from the box I used to hide under my bed as a child, the one filled with things I was not allowed to speak about. Now they rose. Outside, the wind pressed softly against the window. Inside, it was quiet but not empty. I moved through the apartment, slowly folding a blanket, rinsing a mug, watering the single rose on the counter. It was not a big space, just a modest 1-bedroom above a law office, but it was mine. No more creaky floorboards echoing with someone else's rage, no more houseplants dying from silence. When the mailbox clanged, I did not rush to it. I let it sit. Later, with tea in hand, I opened the small silver door and pulled out the usual. A utility bill, a handmade card from Thad's niece, and a cream envelope. No return address, just my full name written in neat, tight handwriting. I knew it too well. I stood there for a moment, just breathing. Back inside, I set the other mail on the counter and brought the letter to the window. The light was soft, like early spring fog. I slid my finger under the flap and pulled the folded sheet free. Marin, I was raised hard. I raised you harder. Maybe too hard. I see that now. I do not expect anything. Call if you want. Mom, no, I am sorry. No mention of the forest, the gallery, not even my name again, just fragments. I read it twice, then folded it gently and placed it on the windowsill next to a small rock from the creek behind our old house. And I let it sit there. Not every letter needed an answer. Some were meant to float quietly into the air and disappear like breath on cold glass. The next afternoon, Lizette stopped by with a thermos of chamomile and 2 honey scones. She tossed her coat on the back of my stool like she had always lived here and slid into the chair by the window. I saw it, she said, nodding toward the letter. I figured you would, I replied, pouring her a cup. We sat quietly for a while, listening to the hum of the street below. She finally asked, "So, will you call her?" I looked out the window. A child was walking his dog, one hand gripping the leash, the other holding a juice box. The dog kept pulling toward a tree. The boy kept laughing. "Maybe one day," I said, "but not today." She nodded, taking a slow sip. "That is fair." I turned to her and added, "Today I am not rebuilding bridges made of ash." She smiled softly. I stood and walked to the tiny corner shelf by my desk. A candle sat in a ceramic holder I had made years ago. I pulled a small piece of raw clay from the bowl beside it, just enough to fit in my palm. I lit the candle, held the clay over it for a moment, then dropped it into the flame. It hissed, twisted, and turned dark as it curled slowly into itself. "Some fires purify," I said quietly. Later that week, the studio invited me to install one of my pieces on their main wall. I chose the Phoenix. We mounted it carefully together. The light hit it just right in the afternoon, casting a long shadow that reached halfway across the floorboards. Beneath it, a brass plaque read, "By Marin Arden, for the girl who survived." People stopped in front of it one by one. Some paused for a long time, as if the weight of their own stories was pulling them still. One woman placed her hand firmly over her heart. Another whispered, "That is me. That is my story too." I realized then I did not need to explain it anymore. It spoke for itself. On a quiet Friday evening, I found myself back in my little apartment, hands deep in cool clay once again. The wheels spun slowly as I shaped a new figure. A tiny girl, not kneeling, not hiding, just sitting cross-legged. Eyes closed, arms folded like wings her own. I carved a soft smile into her face. Not wide, not loud, just calm. When I finished, I signed the base with a simple M. Then I stepped outside. The sun was setting, casting the sky in hues of orange rose and soft gold. The air smelled faintly of eucalyptus and concrete. It was not a dramatic evening, just an honest one. As I stood there on the landing, keys in one hand, phone in the other, I felt something shift inside. Not loudly, not all at once, but fully. They had raised me like a tool, so I let them rust. But I became fireproof. And more than that, I became free. I was no longer a shadow hiding in someone else's house. I was standing on my own ground, holding my own story and letting it breathe without permission. The world around me had not grown softer, but I had grown stronger. That strength was not about denying pain, it was about transforming it, shaping it into something that could not be broken. And maybe that is the point of all of this. We are not only what was done to us, we are also what we choose to build afterward. We do not have to inherit silence. We can inherit resilience. If you have ever carried scars that no one saw, if you have ever been told you were worthless but dared to believe otherwise, your story matters too. Share your thoughts, your experiences, your own voice down in the comments. I would be honored to read them. If you felt something in this story, please like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to the channel. Do not forget to turn on the notification bell so you can listen to more stories like this, stories that remind us we are not alone. And when you leave a comment, drop these words: claim my freedom. Simple, strong, and yours. Thank you for spending this time with me. Take care of yourself, hold your own story with courage, and I will see you in the next video. Until then, goodbye, and may you always remember you are stronger than silence.